When the current Ford Focus RS was first revealed, there was a lot of hype and excitement about it, much more so than the two previous generations. And there was one very simple reason for that. No, not Ken Block, it was because power was going to all four wheels. And that had everybody brimming over with nostalgia for this car. What a beautiful scene. It's like a car magazine shoot from the 90s. All it needs is a tobacco filter.
This is the famous Escort RS Cosworth. Can you believe it's 25 years since it first appeared on our roads? And this car, it's not just any car. This car belonged to SVE, or Special Vehicle Engineering. It's still owned by Ford, and it's the only one in yellow. SVE apparently always used to do one car in a colour that wasn't available on the standard production models. There are a few other bits in here as well. These Recaro seats, which are an upgrade even from the ones you find in a Monte Carlo Special Edition. They creak rather a lot, so apologies for that. And of course, they've got this yellow wheel. Sadly, the yellow doesn't actually match the exterior of the car. It's more of a sort of egg yolk yellow as opposed to the primrose yellow of the exterior.
As well as the unique colour and all the unusual parts, this car is interesting because it was used by SVE to do some of the sign-off work on the RS Cosworth. Under the bonnet you will find an early YBT engine, which means it has one of Garrett's big turbos. You can tell this because the engine is blue in colour, whereas the later, smaller turbo cars are silver. But we're not done yet. Here's something else you might not know.
Here's one of those brilliantly useless nuggets of information that I absolutely love. Everybody knows that the Escort RS Cosworth was homologated for Group A regulations. That's one of the things people love it. They bang on about it all the time. Why Group A was better than Group B, what it gave us. But it was also used for Group N homologations. And the rules there, well, they said you couldn't modify the steel bodywork at all. So what they did is the lines up here are incredibly high, specifically for Group N regulations, so they could fit larger wheels. What's more, it was most successful as a Group N car anyway. So there you go.
And there's still more.
One other little curiosity from the homologation is the fact that all the early cars, the 2,500 done for the Group A regs, came with a sort of camping water bladder and some pipe beneath the rear seats. So this completely confused people when it arrived at dealerships and even the press office as well. But it was actually because they needed a water container for the intercooler in the rally car, so they had to supply it in all 2,500 original cars. This road is the B660, and it might not be that glamorous, but it's a road that's been used for road testing, well, probably since this car was around and possibly before, so it's a great road to actually drive these cars on, and they really do feel at home here. So what's the Escort RS Cosworth like today? It's still really good, actually. The standard the car came with 227 brake horsepower. This car's actually had a stage 1 conversion, so it's up to 280 brake horsepower. You have to really press the throttle all the way down, and that might sound like a very odd thing to say, but in most modern cars, the throttle tends to be sort of, it's all about the top bit, so you get that response, and obviously turbocharging's moved on as well. So here you've got to flex your ankle a bit. The gear shift was MT75 box is perhaps longer of throw than you might expect these days, but it's still got a really nice engagement when it actually goes into gear. There's a lot of roll in the corners, so you have to be patient as you go through.
It's a delicious feeling carrying the speed into corners, perhaps trailing the brakes a little, and then feeling the weight transition from front to rear through the car, the back wheel scribing a smooth arc into a smidgen of oversteer as the corner unwinds.
Tiny little wheels on this, and obviously the balloon-like rubber, and quite old rubber at that, means that it does move around very progressively in corners.
There might be surprisingly little steering feel, and the engine note certainly doesn't live up to the exuberance of the rear wing, although to be fair it would probably take an unsilenced V16 to do that. But the Escort RS Cosworth is, thankfully, still very entertaining to drive today, and there is absolutely no doubt that it remains an icon. So, a quarter of a century on, does the Focus feel like it's worthy of following in the Escort's tyre tracks?
25 years on and we seem to have lost a rear wing and gained a couple of doors. There is plenty that has actually stayed the same though. We've got a manual gearbox, hurrah! We've even got a manual handbrake, which is a bit of a rarity these days. The It's still got a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, although of course it's transverse now rather than longitudinal.
Just like the Escort, there are Recaro seats in the Focus too, and although these aren't the optional buckets, I think these more everyday chairs are actually the ones to have. Just as in the Escort though, you still seem to sit quite high. The 3 dials on the dash, complete with the boost gauge in the middle, are a nice reminder of the old car too, but there are obviously differences as well. The multitudinous airbags speak of a safety the Escort can only dream of, and a USB wasn't even a glint in the eye of the Escort's CD player when it was new.
So how's the driving experience changed? Well, for a start, everything's just much more instant. Throttle response is much more instant, the gear shift is shorter, turn into corners is just so much more direct. The 4-wheel drive system, of course, in the Escort is locked at 34/66 front to rear. In this, well, you get attitude from actually being on the throttle. That clever diff at the back with the clutch packs on either side that vectors the torque around and actually helps the car through the corner. You can really feel that working. Of course, we've now got much more power to actually put to use in the corners as well.
Under the bonnet, the engine has grown from 2 to 2.3 litres and is now all aluminium, while the turbocharger is a more sophisticated twin-scroll item, all of which goes some way to accounting for the improvement in performance figures, with 0 to 60 having dropped by about 1.5 seconds to 4.7 seconds, while top speed has increased by nearly 30 miles an hour to 165 flat out.
Other things where you can hear it popping away. I've got this in sport mode. Some people hate it. I love it. I can't deny it. Call me a child, but the sport mode in this I think is just brilliant. Reminds me of anti-lag. Everybody talks about the drift mode in this car. Now, clearly using drift mode on the road is not actually a very good idea, but even just in sport mode you can still feel the rear balance to this car, and you can steer it through on the throttle. It's nicely throttle adjustable as well. It doesn't, you can just play it through corners, which is really nice, so it feels very rear biased. What a fun car. Unlike the Escort, obviously this has adaptable suspension, although to be honest it might as well not, because the firmer of the 2 suspension modes is, well, it's useless to be perfectly honest. Even on a track it just hops and skips around. The previous generations of Focus RS were very good, they're very enjoyable, but in the same way that you're supposed to get your height or your hair or your teeth or something, I can never remember what, from your grandfather, and it skips a generation, this feels like the proper progeny of the Escort RS Cosworth.
The big question, the great unknowable, is how history will judge the Focus RS. It's never going to have the pedigree of the Escort, as it's not a homologation special. No matter how much Ken Block hoons a Focus around rallycross circuits or Gymkhana sets, it won't really sprinkle any extra kudos on the road car. But what we can judge is how the driving experience stacks up. Over the years since the Escort, we've got used to 4-wheel drive heroes like Subaru Imprezas, Mitsubishi Evos, and even latterly the fantastic Golf R. But even in light of those, the current Focus RS still feels pretty special. And as the Escort has shown today, a car that's really good to drive will always be desirable.